Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen, depending where you are. Thank you for forsaking your other priorities to join us on a Sunday. I'm also joining in from a resort, and you too have stopped whatever you were doing to be here today. So, thank you very much. This conversation is being conducted with Wasif on behalf of Open Global. So Open, as we all know, most of us are members here, is a global organization with chapters around the world, about 15 chapters that serve the interest of Pakistani community abroad as well as within Pakistan now, through local presence, networking, advocacy, focus on business development issues, and organizing events like this. So the idea is to provide Pakistani business leaders around the world with a contact base and with an ability to connect with each other and to learn profitable strategies to grow their businesses in different parts of the world. So, having said that, our ethos is strictly entrepreneurial. So, coming back to the purpose of today's meeting, we will, we'll try and make the moment worth your time. Habib University is a stellar initiative as the first liberal arts university in Pakistan. Our guest today is its founding president, Wasif Rizvi. Wasif has led Habib University to amazing success and wide international acclaim in a short period of time. To borrow Emily Dickinson's metaphor, the way the lily flourishes out of the earth like a child growing to maturity, we are witnessing a fledgling school becoming a formidable institution. Open is, in its own little way, is glad and proud to be a part or a supporter or an admirer of this journey. Junaid Qureshi, our Silicon Valley president, two of the board members from Toronto were at Habib University recently. They came back immensely inspired. Then Jivanji is going to inaugurate an endowed chair at Habib University within a fortnight. So we had a podcast with Wasif some 3 months ago, just before he honored Open Toronto's annual conference as a keynote speaker. That evoked a great deal of interest among many of us to solicit another interface with Wasif, and that's why we are here today to continue the conversation. The way we'll go is that I'll ask Wasif a few questions to sketch out a picture, and then you can color it with your questions. So here we go. Wasif, in the name of Open and on behalf of everyone listening, I want to thank you for your being with us today.
Very, very honored to be here.
Yeah, and so in order to share what you, your team, and your institution have been up to, let's start with very basic, some foundational understanding. So tell us about the quiet power, the essence, the importance of liberal arts education, how it is a gift of academic phase that lasts for a lifetime of an individual. So based on that background, then we'll proceed further.
So the foundational principle of any form of scholarly pursuit, um, reaching back to any version of antiquity or classic time or historical time, whichever one may subscribe to, place the inquiry, which are now known as humanities, at the heart of it. Especially in the Islamic tradition of learning that started to take shape about 1400 years ago. Such inquiry were deep integrated even in religious texts as well as philosophical texts that were built, that were inspired by a new form of viewing the world and the universe. And that continued throughout centuries. That how an understanding of oneself, greater reality, a sense of diverse engagement with the world, a philosophical insight into the unknown. They have been defining the idea of learning and scholarship for millennia. So much so that there was no real distinction that existed, disciplinary distinction that we can think about currently, or what we have classified as late as 150 years ago. So physics and philosophy was basically the same thing. That's how they would view themselves. In the modern time, the classification of learning became, although it had its advantages, but it became an increasingly an interesting problem. So much so that in year 2005, there was a conversation that was happening between Princeton and MIT and Caltech, I think. That was the 100th year of the publication of Special Theory of Relativity paper by Einstein. So that was the 100th anniversary, 2005. And the conversation was sparked by a female graduate student. She posted the original manuscript of that paper on that site. This was before Facebook and social media, but there were ways in internet that it was being engaged. And she asked an interesting question, that what is so weird about this paper, Einstein's paper? So they looked at it and everybody had their own theory, but the answer was quite staggering. That in today's academy, that paper wouldn't be accepted as a proper academic paper because it didn't follow the structures that are prescribed. It didn't have many footnotes, hardly any, or references. It was just a brilliant, insightful reflection regarding the possibilities in the natural world. So Einstein basically was reflecting the value of a great liberal education, which he never formally attained, but that the values of it were present, and a highly regularized, structured, compartmentalized, utilitarian model that we have become accustomed to in the past 3-4 decades. And the charge led by, I'm in the company of entrepreneurs and so on, but technologists and subscribers to scientism, not necessarily serious scientists, but somewhat who were sort of enamored with the idea of science. Now that has its issues and challenges everywhere in the world, but in the place of the world where I come from, Pakistan, it started to show some very horrific consequences. And those consequences were seen and were observed by the rest of the world. And not too long ago, a number of studies came out. One of them was provocatively titled, "Why Engineers Make Good Terrorists." So there's a lot of data that got analyzed that extremism, there's at least fifths of highly volatile extremists seem to have one thing in common. They have professional education. They're doctors and engineers and bankers and accountants. And the other thing in common in them was that none of them had any humanities background. So, and we were seeing that phenomena firsthand in Pakistan. The need for a liberal, broad-based engagement in forming a sensible view of the world was never strongly than in a Pakistan of post 9/11. So that our urgent requirement, need, call for a hearkening back to the idea of pursuit of higher learning that existed elegantly over centuries in many cultures somehow got disrupted in the latter half of 20th century, and we started seeing the outcome of it. And ironically, Pakistan became focus where business leaders and corporations started to feel a need for graduates who would come from a broad understanding of the world instead of just being focused on figuring out one problem.
Mhm. Well, thank you very much. That's beautifully described. Actually, when you were speaking, that reminded me of Ghalib, who said, "अपने पे कर रहा हूँ कयास अहले दहर का, समझा हूँ दिल पजीर मताए हुनर को मैं." But luckily, your quest has been a lot more successful than Ghalib insinuated. So tell us about the foundation of Habib University and what ignited your passion. Partly you had covered that, but on a personal level, what ignited your passion, the fire for a liberal arts university in Pakistan, apart from, based on your journey. Part of it you had covered in what you said.
Right. So Habib University, because there are, mashallah, very accomplished folks on this call. So I'm going to put you up to a bit of a memory test. So there are, let's say, 5 numbers to remember. So the first number is 87. The second number is 118. The third number is 2.5 and 97.5. It's one number, 100. The fourth number is less than 1. And the final number is 65.
In progress.
So if I were to tell, there's an echo in the call. So if we started with 118, that's Pakistan's ranking in global higher education out of 129 countries that are tracked. So Pakistan's higher education is regarded among the worst in the world. It's by far the worst in South Asia and in Asia generally, especially among countries that has large population base. So countries like Iran, Vietnam, Mexico, Brazil, Indonesia, now Bangladesh, what to speak of India and China, they're wildly more successful in creating a coherent, sensible higher education framework within their own countries, with the exception of Pakistan. So Pakistan is in the vicinity of Afghanistan, basically, in terms of enrollment, and Ethiopia and so on. So the two reasons, immediate questions come to mind that why it is so bad. So the two reasons that are quoted, that Pakistan has literally the world's worst undergraduate program. So the most consequential, the most crucial stage of higher education is what happens immediately after high school. And Pakistan in its entire history has not been able to know what that stage is. So there are at least 6 different types of undergrads which exist in Pakistan. And each one of them is more woeful than the other. So they spend from 2 years to 6 years, whatever kind of BA degree that's available. So that's, again, is widely quoted and analyzed. So it is one of the worst, if not the worst. And never had the state or even the private sector never understood what does it mean to craft a coherent 4-year experience for students who have just come out of high school, for them to be then positioned as sensible, engaged citizens who will then realize their potential, whether exploring business, entrepreneurship, jobs, or academia. The second bit that weighs it down is the next number, which is 2.5 and 97.5. That's the opportunity part. So Pakistan's gross enrollment in higher education is at 12, which is one of the lowest in the world. And within that, when private universities started, which are in Pakistan's case is 40 years old, and they were started out of a martial law decree because constitutionally you couldn't have private universities in Pakistan. So 𝐦𝐤𝐤𝐿 allowed Aga Khan to start as a martial law administrator. So they all ran into, and then when they got regularized in the 90s, they all ran into a similar, identical problem, which was finance. And all of it ended on student tuition. So in Pakistan, private universities, operational dependence on tuition is more than 98%, which is the highest in the world, by the way, comparing to private universities. So if your entire function is depending on collecting fees from students, there are two options available. Either you become really bad, which most of the universities are, so to keep the fee at a manageable level so you can have enough students, or you just become universities for rich people. So, and in Pakistan, there's a predictor that's built in the high school that who may have some money. And that's predictor are the two examination systems. So one is an A-level, O-level stream. And the other is your metric FSC, which is known as public examination system. So 2022, 101.6 million kids came out of high school in Pakistan. 40,000 of them were from A-level, O-level, which is 2.5%. 97.5% came out of metric and FSC. So we looked at the enrollment of the three, let's call them good universities in Pakistan. One in Lahore and two in Karachi. And 98% of their enrollment comes from that small 2.5%, from those 40,000 kids. And so that 98% kids who are coming out of metric and FSC are reduced to less than 2%. So you obviously can't claim to have a great university which pre-disenfranchises 98% of the students. So the reason to admit those students in those great numbers is basically economics. So that's the other massive problem that we looked at. So we said, all right, we're going to, so what is required is that we need to create one of the best quality undergraduate programs, as good as any in the world, like an Amherst or a Chicago or a Columbia. There are obvious ways of doing that you need to have very high quality faculty and you need to create a great liberal arts core. So that's the first problem to solve, which is the academic problem. And the second problem is that it wouldn't be that great a program if it didn't allow everybody to participate. So we will become the first private university in the country or in the region and in the rest of the world, with the exception of the United States, that won't recover much money or any money from students. And the example of that exists for 387 years. That's the first number I quoted. And so 2023 minus 387 is 1636. That's the year of founding of Harvard University. Now, Harvard is a remarkable school, much more remarkable in my view, institutionally than academically. Because institutionally, it was the first event when common people got together and created an institution of higher learning. So institution of higher learning was exclusive to either the state or the nobility or the king and so on. So in the United States, it triggered a very different ethos. So Yale came into being and Princeton came into being, and then many other universities, even public universities, when they came along in the 19th century, internalized the same ethos that higher education is the mandate of larger society, not of the government exclusively. So US, there is enormous amount of participation you see in public and private universities where community is supporting and sustaining it, which allows them to not be wholly tuition dependent. Now that's a unique model that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. Somehow it never traveled outside of the United States for 387 years. then we looked at all the natural laws of physics and then religious scriptures. So nothing really prevents it from traveling outside of the United States. But nobody has ever been able to do it.
Mm.
So this was the imagination at the founding of Habib University, that we will create a great undergraduate program as good as any, and we'll make it accessible to everybody. But one thing we have to change for that is the spirit of philanthropy. While in the United States, they give about 300 billion or 400 billion in philanthropy. So the creation of Harvard created a unique philanthropic culture as well. So in the US, people are participating in opera and symphony and theater and museums, and of course, universities. Rest of the world doesn't have any appetite to support universities. Let's say if I ask for money for a university in Sweden, it would be an unfamiliar ask for them, because in their mind, it's the government's job. Pakistan was no different. So in Pakistan, of the total, so Pakistanis contribute a healthy 0.9% of their GDP to let's say charitable or charities and philanthropy, but less than 1% of it is ever given to higher education. While in the US, it's about 20% of that total money, maybe more, because some of it is routed through churches. So that's the problem to solve in Pakistan, or for Pakistanis, that how do they start viewing philanthropy not just as a vehicle for charity or desperation, but as something that they can build institutions with. And we have, as I said, 4-century-long tradition existing that everybody is familiar with, that great institutions have come into being as a result of that. So this became our three-pronged problem. Great undergraduate program, making it accessible to everybody, and convincing society to support it. So as a result, we have created about half of our student body comes from metric and FSC, compared to the other universities who are peer universities where it's less than 2%. And they're all fully funded. About 90% of Habib students require some kind of funding and support, and we arrange for that. And 65 was the last number, which is the $1 million that Habib family has parted with in starting and then ensuring that university doesn't become tuition dependent. So this makes Habib University once in a 400-year event. So that event occurred in the United States in 387 years ago, never traveled outside. No other private university in Pakistan or anywhere in the world is not overly tuition dependent. Apart from us, everybody else is overly tuition dependent outside of the US. And our tuition dependency is less than 25%. So we recover less than 25% of our cost from students, and the rest comes from mobilizing, raising money. We have an endowment, there is return coming from that as well. And we aim to continue to that. And as I said, about 40% of our students are already coming from a background which was hitherto completely unavailable to them.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I think wonderful vision, eloquently described how you set about to slay the three-pronged hydra that you talked about, and
Right.
how you have functioned around minimal tuition dependency that was unheard of in Pakistan. And we talked about the sponsors who have put in $65 million of their own money, and that's amazing. At the same time, all of this required enabling power, despite the vision being powerful, need being there, and you brought that enabling power to Habib University. I think the sponsors did a great job in getting you at the helm of affairs. As me said, and knowing you, ऐसे आहू है रमपुल्दा की वहशत कोनी मुश्किल थी सहर किया एजाज किया जिन लोगों ने तुझको राम किया. So now that you were won over and you have been there, you have stayed at Habib University, given it to your heart and your blood and toil for 10 years and counting. How will you define that journey, Wasif? What have been some of the biggest challenges along the way? What has been journey like?
So the journey, I think maybe the shortest way to describe it is a journey of lot of myth busting. So when I entered into journey, I had subscribed to a number of myths about Pakistan, about the way Pakistan functions and the way its establishment is, and how politicians are corrupt, and how nobody really is interested in any good. So thankfully, almost all of these myths and assumptions, in case of Habib University, proved to be extremely wrong.
Hmm, interesting.
And in the city of Karachi, when we started our project, that was perhaps the worst time in Pakistan and in that city's history. So there was a big backlash post 9/11 for all these lashkars and groups that Pakistan had cultivated. They were rebelling against their handlers. So Pakistan losing like, easily 30, 40, 50 people every day were being killed in countrywide violence. So in the midst of that, we started this university. And never, with obviously few incidences here and there, we felt that there was a general consensus to support it. General consensus in Sindh Assembly to support our charter because it went to the floor. General consensus, even with the kinds of conversations that we were hosting and we were advocating with the media, with civil society, apart from first few efforts that, maybe somebody can get a job at Habib University or some student can get admitted from outside the regular process. And those attempts were politely declined. We felt that there was a wide-scale reverence that emerged about the institution, that's a fair institution. It follows highest meritorious norms. And we got support. We got support from the courts. We got support from larger society. In Pakistan, we have more than about 700 recurring donors, mostly from Karachi, who have allowed us to carry this kind of deficit. So the general journey has been largely of surprises, pleasant surprises, and of affirmation and of hope. That many, let's say, lazy stereotypes that one hears about, generally about Pakistan, and many times even more specific to Karachi, are not that substantial.
Okay, that's amazing. That's very reassuring, heartening. I have a question. So, from my perspective, education is not just about lending you the current or power. It's about kindling a light. It's about preparing an individual where about whom we can say, "जहाँ रहेगा वहीं रोशनी लुटाएगा, किसी चिराग का अपना मकान नहीं होता." And you have been producing those bearers of light at Habib University. When you were here, Wasif, you explained how Habib University students are breaking the myth that receiving a liberal arts education means limiting our options, because that was, immensely well-entrenched myth in Pakistan, in particular, probably in South Asia. And how Habib University students are demonstrating that the skills they gain are highly transferable and can be applied to help us to flourish in almost any field. Now, we discussed that, but what are some of the things that you think that make Habib University students distinctive among college or university graduates in Pakistan?
I think so. There are few things which stand out. Obviously, the content of their learning is different. So their general awareness of who they are and where they are is obviously superior because they go through history, philosophy, other critical thinking courses very rigorously, and it's a requirement. A third of their program is invested to that. So that's immediately it is felt. Because it's a shared experience, I think an informal community of students develop. So we have engineering students and humanities students, and they work together while they are at the university in various projects. So I think they internalize a sense of being able to communicate with someone who does not speak their language and has a different view of the world, which is highly valued in the workplace now, because you have teams who are working on different challenges and projects, products. I think their own anxiety about being in Pakistan is addressed to a great degree. So when they go through their program, they realize that Pakistan is not on Mars. The issues and challenges in Pakistan can be explained by understanding the world better. So it's usually the most reflex sentence that one hears in Pakistan. Pakistan mein aise hi hota hai, as if it's only in Pakistan.
ऐसे ही चलता है.
Exclusive. Right.
एक इजाजत हो अगर तो मैं वासिफ साहब आपसे एक सवाल पूछूं.
आप
जी
अगर
आसिफ साहब
रफी
की अगर
साहब
इजाजत
थोड़ी
है.
देर आप 5 मिनट तवक्कुफ कर लें तो फिर हम सवाल के लिए पूछेंगे इसको.
ठीक.
इसमें सवाल
ओके.
जवाब का सेशन है, असल मकसद वही है.
जी.
जी वासिफ प्लीज.
So I think so that helps them to really not immediately wanting to seek a way out. They are curious about Pakistan and Pakistan's workplaces. Then there is a degree of skills that they develop. So another unique skill, we have been fortunate to be a close partner with Stanford University, who have helped us develop a very elaborate design thinking program, which again is interdisciplinary, which is now in very high demand in corporations. User experience, user interface, how to solve problems and how to design products which are empathetic to users. So Habib University is fortunate in that regard that we are the only one who actually has that as a very prominent pedagogical tool. And then again, rigor of the program. So the work ethic and the rigor, if you have very high quality faculty, they are very demanding. So that is a different kind of academic and work ethic on campus. Then diversity perhaps is the most enriching of their experience. So we have students who come from every background, all walks of life, and all of them have different views of the world. Many times these groups of students meet with someone like that for the first time in their life, and then they are there together for 4 years. So that richness of experience of being part of or true representation of society is matchless, is peerless. And then within diversity, there are other forms of diversity. So there's great gender diversity. About 51% of our students are female, or 52. So that is another kind of ethic and culture that gets developed by working with such interesting diverse teams. Minors, we have a very elaborate system of minors. So we have our computer scientists who do a minor in philosophy, and our philosophers who do a minor in engineering. So that allows them to become very effective in their workplaces when they go out, because they're understanding even technical and regarding something that which is not their major, essentially high. So a combination living on campus and being with a different peer group, working very hard, being in a rigorous program, pedagogically in a way, all of that comes together to create a unique outcome.
That is amazing, and the journey has just started. It continues to flourish. The moment of inspiration you had, तमाम उम्र में फैला दिया वो लम्हा जब एक बर्क सी कसरे ख्याल में चमकी. Before we open the discussion, it reminds me of George Enders, what he said, that in times of drastic change, it's the learners who inherit the future. The learned usually find themselves beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists.
Wow.
So, yeah. So with that, learned always dealing with the world that no longer exists. Those who want to deal with future are learning. So with that, we'll open the discussion. If need be, I will ask more questions. I think we all set for a robust discussion and interactive discussion with very erudite people who are a part of this audience. नकी साहब आप अब अपना सवाल पूछिए.
आपकी आवाज म्यूट है नकी साहब.
ये अब हो गई, सही है.
मैं ये पूछना चाहता था कि इतनी काफ़ी अब पाकिस्तान में प्राइवेट यूनिवर्सिटीज़ है और जाहिर है कि हबीब यूनिवर्सिटी का भी एक अहम रोल है. तो क्या हमारे इन यूनिवर्सिटीज़ में से इंक्लूडिंग हबीब यूनिवर्सिटी ऐसे स्टूडेंट्स निकले जिन्होंने किसी यानी इनोवेशन में, किसी बहुत ही बड़े काम में उनका कोई रोल रहा हो, और उसके मुतालिक जाहिर है अगर है भी तो उससे उमूमी तौर पे हमारी कम्युनिटी बिल्कुल ही नावाकिफ़ है. तो ये प्रोग्राम इस लिहाज से यानी काफ़ी यूज़फुल है कि एक अच्छी यूनिवर्सिटी के जिससे ताल्लुक़ है उनका, हबीब यूनिवर्सिटी, जिसके रेपुटेशन भी है कराची में ही नहीं पाकिस्तान में और शायद कुछ बाहर भी हो. लेकिन ये कि हबीब यूनिवर्सिटी के स्टूडेंट्स हो या किसी और यूनिवर्सिटी के, जिनसे वासिफ रिजवी साहब हमें आगाह करें.
जी, वो यहाँ पे तो तवील उसकी लिस्ट हो जाएगी क्योंकि एक तो निस्बतन नई यूनिवर्सिटी है, माशाल्लाह बहुत अच्छा काम कर रहे हैं. हमारे तकरीबन 5% स्टूडेंट्स हैं कि who have become declared entrepreneurs and they have raised money and many rounds of funding. So they are invested in something to solve a social or environmental related challenge. I think Habib education inspires them to do that. So आपसे offline जो है, I have some team members in this conversation. तो मैं उनसे दरख्वास्त करूंगा कि they'll share with you the list of the companies and students who in our view are doing very important work. It's obviously just the beginning because our first batch graduated in 2018, so which was not that long ago. So, but there is definitely that kind of work, hopefully impactful work and prominent work, which promises to emerge from some of the things that Habib students are involved in. So, मैं बिल्कुल आपसे, I will share with you a number of names and groups of students, our alumni, who have teamed up with alumni from other universities as well in investing themselves into doing something interesting.
Yes, before we go to next question, which comes from Imran, Naqi Saab, there have been a couple of students, they have gotten amazing accolades from American universities. So specifically, ये आपको उससे आगाह कर सकते हैं. Individual ज़ाती तफासिल में नहीं जा सके इस वक्त. Imran, please go ahead, ask your question. Please raise your hand.
So thank you for this really amazing or inspiring sort of experiment. So I am actually a part of another experiment. I'm based in Sharjah, and there is a university called the American University of Sharjah, which was formed about, 25 years ago, and it's also a liberal arts oriented, probably the first one in this region. So we have some experience with this type of stuff. The question that I have for you, two questions actually. So the first one is basically, what we find, I've been here 20 years, and what I find is actually, it's not so much the curriculum. You can devise a curriculum which is liberal arts oriented, but it's the people who are delivering the curriculum that actually pass on those values to the students. And I'm just wondering how you are able to do that. My experience, especially when I deal with people from Pakistan, I myself am a metric from Pakistan and FSC, so I'm from that whatever N%, right? So, but my undergrad and everything else was in the US. But the thing is, when I meet people from Pakistan, and this is a very unscientific sort of observation, especially in academia, people who did their undergrad in Pakistan have a very strange mindset. They have a PhD, but actually, I'm sorry, but their thinking is just, in this, I mean, the thinking does not reflect what you would expect a person of that caliber to be. So that's the question. How do you find people like that? The second question, which we are struggling with now also, is eventually you will get into a sort of a rankings race, right? So initially, when you're starting, I think you are 8,000 or something. LUMS is around 600 to 800. It took us 25 years to get to be about 360 or something. And there's a balance, right? There's a balance between going for rankings, which is mostly research oriented, as opposed to delivering a good education. So I'm just wondering, it's too early for you to think about that, or what are your thoughts on that? Thank you.
Thank you, MIRZA. Excellent questions. So you're right. We faced and continue to face exactly the same challenge. So within our faculty hiring framework, we developed a system in which we were looking and we had placed a premium on US undergrads. So their PhD could be from Europe, but undergrad actually became an important focus for us. And we were fortunate to develop a core of our faculty of about 20 people who had that thing in common, that their undergrad was from the US, and in most cases, their grad school was from the US. Some of them were not Pakistanis. So initially, when we established that particular core, and our core, I think, a slight difference, you're right that content can be created relatively easy, but we were a little bit tuned in that we crafted a very contextual and unique content as well. So at Habib, for instance, we don't do subjects, we do forms of thought. So there are 7 forms of thought and action that each student is required to take 12 courses, which is roughly a third of their program. And within that, those are quickly historical and social thought, philosophical thought, language and expression, creative practice, scientific method and inquiry, quantitative reasoning, and formal reasoning. These are the forms of thought. Now, within that, many courses are fixed and they are very contextual. So we sort of question. So one of the more famous courses at Habib University is called "What is Modernity," which really questions people's sort of place in time and the experience, which is so violently different from any other historical experience that they are part of, and so on. So it builds from that. So the content played its own role in attracting some of these very interesting people who became our founding faculty. And within that, we had to invest a lot in ensuring that we are getting good quality PhDs who may not have the undergrad understanding or insight. And this problem that you alluded to in the second part is a global problem. That amazing overbalancing, or let's say out of proportion focus on so-called research is almost always at the expense of high quality undergraduate teaching. So we were very mindful of that. So we then thought that one of the missions, internal missions of Habib University is to rehabilitate the intellectual teaching itself. So we would place the same amount of premium and celebration designing a great course as one would do that for a publication or writing. So, and we found many allies around the world, especially among liberal arts colleges, who were facing with similar challenges. Even large R1 universities are now significantly disoriented because they have done something for past 30 years and they're realizing that the contract with undergraduate students has largely been ignored. So we are part of an interesting movement who are trying to bring back that particular balance. So within that balance, even the ranking machine is beginning to take a bit of notice of that. And they are crafting a little bit of more focused ranking of more student-centered, invested in undergraduate teaching kind of institutions to be ranked with their peers. We are seeking a US accreditation from NECI, New England Commission for Higher Education. Probably we'll be forced into sort of thinking about these rankings sometime in the future. But we are doing that while being mindful of all the pitfalls that I have highlighted. So you are absolutely right. The US undergraduate makes a very decisive difference in imagination regarding what kind of culture and environment one requires on a campus. So we continue to try to do that. And now, 7 years on, I think once we establish the primacy of humanities at the heart of the university, I think even our technical PhDs from engineering and computer science, now we see there is a relatively sincere reverence regarding the way Habib University is. So traditional hostility that existed between technical PhDs and the way they would view teaching and undergrad is significantly minimized.
Yeah, no,
Thank you
thank
very
you,
much.
Wasif. Brilliant questions from Imran, talking about the imperative of harnessing competent faculty to carry out the vision and the challenges of journey to respectable ranking. And then next in line is our chairman from Open Chicago, a very well-renowned and respected name within Open echelons. Haris, please.
Thank you for this, Asif, for putting this together. And Wasif, first, I cannot thank you and the founders and the good souls who had the vision to start this. You know, for me now, and maybe I speak for the expat community, I think we just look at Pakistan and we feel that it's almost at an existential crisis. And while the work of Habib University was critical, I think, at least in my mind and many others, it rises to the next level. You know, it's a drop in it's a qatra in the big ocean, but you're doing tremendous work. My question would be two parts. One, how do we scale this to address these massive issues that we've got, right? So it's not just design thinking types of things. These are just so many things that are broken in the country. And I don't know if that's a mandate of the university. So that's one clarification I'd like to get. So how do you scale the good work that you've done to the next level? Secondarily, the role of the 10 million plus expat community around the world, to know a little bit more of how well we all have engaged with the mission, and what would you like to see in this next chapter? Thank you.
Very good. So the first one, I think that the mandate of the university is to inspire what we believe the right kind of focus and imagination regarding society's role in higher education, and obviously the nature of higher education itself. So let me give you some uplifting examples of the last 5 years, 6 years since Habib has been around. So both Aga Khan and LUMS and now IBA, for the first time in their history, they have started scholarship schemes for matric FSC students. So they immediately realized that the disenfranchisement that they had caused, they have to overcome it. So they can no longer have their entire class come from A-level, O-level background and pretend to be a good university. So that has literally happened as a result of Habib University's drive. IBA, that cultivated a brand for last 50 years to be very proudly the first business school outside of the United States that was created by Wharton or something, now are actively dismantling that brand and wanting to call themselves liberal arts. So they have actually started a school of social science and liberal arts. Aga Khan, that had a stalled project for last 35 years to start a liberal arts program, they have gotten going, largely from the impetus and the support and perhaps the encouragement that they got from the founding of Habib University. So that's the general impact on the scene, that we feel that Habib University has pointed to these two problems, that we ought to have a more balanced program at an undergraduate level especially, and we have to provide opportunities to students that has been denied. Directly, we want to a large residential campus and become a 5,000-10,000 student university in next 6-7 years. We have already procured the land and become a very formidable institution only in the world, because we have the making of it already. So I think these are within the mandate of the university. You know, universities are somewhat inward-looking institutions. They're not, you know, they're very different than NGOs, and they do play a long game of just existing and continuing to influence. And because we never had any such institution in our part of the world, especially in Pakistan, we believe that with all the challenges and the crises that Pakistan is facing, if we can somehow stay focused on this, we think that there's good chances that we can continue on that trajectory. The 10 million expats, especially the ones living in the US, need to become a little bit more conscious of where they are. The thing that is most interesting about the US, by cursory analysis, is its higher education system. And what is even more interesting within that higher education is the wide-scale participation of people in engaging and being part of the founding of those universities. It's so unique. It only happens in the US. No such example exists anywhere in the world. What to me is somewhat confusing that citizens, Pakistanis or South Asians who live in the US seem somewhat conscious of that. And when they contribute to causes back home, Pakistani instinct kicks in, that they look at philanthropy just as charity, just as khairat or something. And when they are contributing to causes in the US, in kind of schizophrenic way, they are contributing to a university or a research or museum or something like that. So I think the expectation is that that particular refinement will occur in your imagination regarding supporting causes in Pakistan and becoming part of those causes. Because what it does is, that if it is intellectually at that level, that particular cause, as a citizen, one wishes to be more engaged with. And that particular institution, in turn, becomes much more transparent and much more accountable to the larger society. So it's a win-win. So that would be an orientation that we have. That's what was our presentation last night. We had an event here in Houston. And that would be my message always, that you all have experienced directly or indirectly or every day. You take a walk at University of Chicago. It was created by Rockefeller, but it's a celebration of a community of 500,000 people who come together and contribute and create and so on. And it's virtually true of every great university in this country, whether public or private. So I think if that imagination somehow shifts towards supporting causes in Pakistan, that would be a very impactful thing.
Yeah, no, that is a brilliant answer to a very good question. And especially this, when you talked about how Habib University has inspired or compelled other institutions in Pakistan to follow suit, that's very inspiring. As they say, शहर के अंधेरे को एक चिराग काफी है, 100 चिराग जलते हैं एक चिराग जलने से. Now we have 𝐥𝐤𝐬 who will ask the next question. He's a respectable member of Open Toronto.
Thank you, Asif. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. And thank you, Asif. I think we met here in Toronto when you were here in November or so. So I work for the government here, but I'm also involved in teaching. I teach part-time at 2 or 3 institutions, universities in Toronto, University of Toronto, Ryerson University, which we have recently renamed Toronto Metropolitan University, and Humber College. So my question gets into the academia, and especially in the context of the changing times, digital learning, online courses. And especially during and after COVID, some of the things that we are noticing here, and I'm wondering that I want to get your thoughts on them, is the notion of that you could be anywhere and you could enroll in any program, Harvard, MIT, Stanford, while you are sitting in a village somewhere. So with that, what's happening is that the institutions here, they are going through, there are opportunities and also threats. The threats are that they're losing lots of good candidates towards those opportunities. Oh, sorry, towards those opportunities from institutions which tend to have better brand names. And the opportunities are that they are able to enroll students from across the globe who traditionally would not be able to participate in these kind of opportunities. So I'm wondering that with this kind of element, in the context of Pakistan, this is my assumption, and I want to verify that assumption, that the threat that I'm mentioning that is relevant for a society like Canadian society and the Canadian institutions which are not globally well known, that probably would not be so relevant for Pakistan because Pakistan is, has scarcity of great resources in house, and whatever resources people could get, I think that would be their first choice. But in any case, I think there would be some, aspects or some in the society that would be more open to other opportunities. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on, do you see any pivot happening in your approach as you go forward to of changes that are happening around us globally and locally? And the second part is also that do you see that with these changes, you could tap into the opportunities that present to you by virtue of like the expats like myself who are teaching across the globe, who could participate in then, to help institutions in Pakistan with in providing some global context to the education?
So it depends on what our understanding of university education is, right? So a large part of it is content, and I think now it's widely available, and I think it's a good thing that previously hitherto unengaged or disenfranchised groups, large swaths of the globe, they can be connected and they can be meaningfully connected and hopefully inspired. So to that end, I think one celebrates that. That's not a problem. But I think we just went through a forced global experience of COVID for just doing that. And it was widely discredited as a viable, sustained form of meaningful learning. So almost all over the world, people balk at the idea of, the universities being fully online and students not being able to get to being part of a community on campus. So I think for me, at least, that idea has been sort of laid to rest. Maybe another form of learning and competence, which is eminently possible, that one can continue to craft in this online world through new technologies. But the value of creating a community which comes together and experiences something over 4 years, builds relationships, feels each other, have a sense of empathy, goes through frustrations and real human emotions and ups and downs together, can never be underestimated. I think to me, it is a little reductive to imagine education just as a bundle of content which can be transferred from one place to the other, which obviously is a part of it. But most importantly is just going through an experience with a group of peers that you develop a sense of trust and solidarity and connection with. And I do believe that that particular platform will continue and people will continue to realize its value, just as they did during COVID, that everybody was missing the campus. Parents were saying the same thing, students were saying the same thing. And I think campuses, however, need to make that particular a little bit more cautious for students, maybe have a greater degree of depth and meaningfulness affiliated to it. That what does it mean to be part of a human experience over 4 years? But I do believe that a good balance will be reached. A good thing will be to access those disconnected, disenfranchised parts of the world, many in Pakistan, in Africa, in South America, and so on. That's wonderful, and it should happen. And technology has great potential for that. And universities obviously were never available, widely available, mass available enterprise anyway. So I think the little role that they have for 4 or 5%, so globally 5-6% is the enrollment rate currently in 21st century in tertiary education. That's the participation rate. So I think that particular aspect will continue. So 6, 7, 10% of the people of the world will continue to seek that particular experience.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Very good question and very erudite answer in how education is a lot more than the content itself, and how human society progresses, changes, but then realigns with established wisdom. Next question comes from Hassan Davar, Toronto, open.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Asif Saab, and thank you, Wasif Saab. Very, very valuable conversation. My question for Wasif Sahab is if he could share with us his thoughts on the medium of education, and in particular, how it affects a student's ability to learn, and if it does affect the Pakistani student's ability to learn, and is there something we can do about it?
Oh, it greatly affects, right? So one of the things that we did at Habib University, we made Urdu normal again, right? So even your essay, you can write in Urdu or any regional language and you get accepted. I think that medium of education, for the lack of any, it was just a classist thing. It continues to be. It has no cognitive or intellectual value. It's just that people who had access to English and could mimic whatever they thought was better somehow hegemonized the idea of learning. So it matters a great deal. It is a very violent social, let's say, assault as well on people who are not comfortable with English. At Habib, we made sure that Urdu is a requirement, competence in literary Urdu, not just spoken Urdu. So it's a graduation requirement. It's part of our liberal core. And suddenly, many people in Pakistan who had convinced themselves that they don't understand Urdu became shiers by the end of their 4 years. So I am on the side that languages are a divine gift, and to have this, perhaps one of the most horrific and unheard of genocide is happening on the language itself. And one of the reasons that this genocide happens, we have lost about half of the world's spoken languages in past 50 years. And one of the reasons it's happening is because of this false forcing of medium or media of education. There are limitations in content. There are translations that are not available and so on. So those are technical issues that one needs to keep looking at. But to make a cognitive point and intellectual point, I think a university ought to be a place that celebrates and accepts languages that have been beautifully spoken for thousands of years, especially where we are. And we try to do that. Obviously, we're limited. We don't have enough faculty. We don't have enough people who are comfortable in figuring out a learning experience. But as an intellectual and as a principal point, we believe that a diverse medium of engagement is perhaps a prerequisite to call oneself a university. The word universe is built in the name. And if it somehow aligns itself to a monolithic understanding of language, that to me is very incoherent.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. That was a brilliant answer about the medium of instruction. Hassan, do you have a point? Otherwise,
well, my second thought was if Pakistan can ever do what countries like South Korea or Russia or have done, they teach in a language from the very beginning to the very end, which is one of their own languages. Like, do you think we'll always be dependent in some way, shape, or form on English? And do you think there will always be this sort of differential access to English education in Pakistan, which promotes or sort of preserves the class structure in its own way?
No, I know. I think that, again, if one sort of views it as a daunting but a technical problem to solve, that we need high quality translations, and universities need to invest in those translations. We need to have centers, we need to have scholars who are able to do that. I think that's where one gets away from the politics of it, which are pretty obvious. It's a classist argument. It's like very extremely mediocre people speaking mediocre English, trying to feel good about themselves. So I think that debate is settled. But I think the problem is to be solved is that how do we create the corpus of content that is required for substantial education to be sustained. I think Habib is very invested in that. Obviously, the lower hanging fruit is humanities. So we are investing in a lot of humanities and philosophical translations. The difficult part is technical and science, because that's been very Eurocentric. But hopefully, as we grow, the general culture at the university, the most accepted greeting at Habib University is adab. So every student says, so there's like a resurrection of various ethic and so on. And Urdu is our commencement speaker, student commencement speaker. Many times they give their address in Urdu. So first act was to normalize Urdu in a supposedly elite environment. And I think that particular aspect has been widely, achieved, alhamdulillah. But I think that other problems are scholarly and technical, and we are focused on it. Hopefully, we'll generate enough support for it. But it's a long problem to continue to track. But if a 4-year experience, let's say, we have admitted a grammar school kid who has gone through a 4-year experience of feeling normal about Urdu, we're hoping that they'll be a more sensible citizen when they go out, as opposed to if they hadn't experienced a university like Habib.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. That was about the importance of medium of instruction, and you explained how education and teaching is a lot more than just a medium of instruction. Our next question comes from Tariq Khan. Tariq Khan is a very senior member of Open Global, and he is our president for Open New York. Tariq, please.
Assalamu alaikum, Asif. What a great program. Unfortunately, I had a conflict, so I was a little late. Wasif Saab, thank you so much. I had the opportunity to visit the Habib University a few years ago, and I was thoroughly impressed. I've been involved with New York University, NYU faculty for the last 17 years. And one of the challenges that as a student of academics that we are looking at, obviously one is the machine learning and artificial intelligence, but more from my perspective, I think the whole pedagogy is being challenged when the reason a lot of people, at least in the capitalist society in the US, the reason they go to top universities like NYU is because they can get good jobs in good companies. Now companies like Amazon and Google, they are hiring people without any degrees, right? And some point in time, I wouldn't be surprised if there is an Amazon University or Google University with a full 4-year education. At NYU, we have virtually an annual budget of $5 billion, being the largest private university in the world. We're really looking at a deeper dive. Now, the impact globally may be very different on this, I would love your thoughts, and from a critical thinking point of view, this would really be a great conversation that how the other universities are really going to handle this situation.
So we had a similar question not too long ago. I think that this is a genuine issue. I think part of it is the way it will assault cognition and intellectual fabric. And I think universities should be taking a more prominent stand on it. I think universities are a little too passive in agreeing with the Google interpretation of what knowledge and what learning is, which is basically technical skills and a lot of content. And I don't think they will do a 4-year program. They are in the business of creating a 6, 7 month, 8-month program for kids in Lagos and Dhaka and so on that they can sort of plug into their machine. So I think that we have to come up with a coherent and a more conscious definition of what the experience of being part of a human community while pursuing interesting things together for 4 years means. And I think that's maybe at NYU and many large campuses that may be lost, but in a small liberal arts college, we have seen the value of that. And in a very fractured society like Pakistan, how if we have made an effort to bring students from all backgrounds, addressing some of these class and language and so on questions and many, it is remarkably inspiring and healing for those students, as well as for faculty and so on. And I don't think that that experience is possible in any other format and framework. It is possible. I'm not saying that the structured 4-year is the answer, but the idea of just convening a community of people who develop a sense of bonding and trust and intellectual meaning over the course of 4 years, in case of a 4-year program. The other thing was that I don't think that enough has been said by the universities over a forced experience that we all went through in 2020 and 2021, which, Tariq, you will agree too, that it was largely seen as negative when people were forced away from campuses. Nobody celebrated that, oh, the age of Amazon and Google is here. So it was balked by students, by parents, by families, by everybody, that this is just not the way to learn. So, and I think enough needs to be said about it. Look, this is not something in the future it has actually literally happened in our recent past. And we saw it, and we saw the limitations of it, and we saw the gaps in it, and many times absurdity of it. So, and that created a demand that campuses should be open and everybody, but it's too much abstraction. I think we need to have a more coherent and a clear thesis about what does it mean to craft a community on a university campus. And that carries a great meaning of learning with itself, apart from the content, which obviously the online version of it is only reduced to just being the content. And what does it mean to have a community? Which, as in our case at Habib, our experience is that actually the community experience in many times is far more profound and powerful than just going through the content.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. That was a very perspicacious question about the technology shaping the future of education and how that is propelling the next generation instructional content. A lot can be discussed on this. I will read a comment from Naqi Sahab for Wasif Rizvi. He said, Habib University can open a course on translation of latest works on both arts and sciences. So have a curriculum dedicated to translation. So that was the comment for your taking. And the next question is from an academic who talked about the imperative of a good faculty and the challenge of ranking. So this is Imran again. Thank you, Imran.
Yes, thank you. Oh, by the way, I'm also a founding member of Open UAE. So I am somewhat related to Open as well. So I just wanted to comment on two things actually. So one, I think this whole notion of what should be the language of instruction. I think it's pretty clear that for early years, definitely your mother tongue makes a difference. I'm not sure if that is so for higher education. Especially, I think, because in technical areas, the rate at which the knowledge is being created, I mean, the half-life of information in my field is 90 days, right? So having said that, I think there are very nice large language models that can do a pretty decent job of translating from English to Urdu. I've tried some of these, and so maybe that's the way to go for the technical side of the equation. And I don't know if somebody's doing that. I'd love to see somebody set up an initiative where we can actually take some technical content and semi-automatically convert it, because I think that's where you're going to get the value in the higher education. So just wanted to see what Habib University was thinking.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very apt remark. Wasif, you have a comment on that?
No, I just want to thank you. I think, as I said, that we are looking at more stable content. Their half-life is 1,000 years or more, which is in humanities and social science. So you're right. I think that's an interesting challenge, and I actually didn't think of it that way. That actually poses another challenge to the idea of translation, when the knowledge is being created at that rate and in a different language, and it keeps updating itself so frequently. So I think offline, Imran, would love to take more of your input regarding many issues. One of them is this. Thank you so much. This was very interesting.
Thank you. So our next question comes from Hafiz Zaidi. He is a very senior executive. He's our member of Open in UK. Plus, Hafiz Sahab also founded and heads an admirable charity, which is Professional Education Foundation. So they provide scholarships to students who gain admissions to professional institutions but cannot afford the fees. Hafiz Sahab, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Asif Sahab. Wasif, what a great presentation. And one thing which you raised initially in your talk about the difference between the haves and have-nots and having an impact in the education. I heard a sentence somewhere in Pakistan, which is probably a bit harsh, but I would like to repeat. It says that in Pakistan, we are suffering from education apartheid. It's a very sad comment, but if you look at it, I think the numbers actually vouch for it. And I'm so glad, I'm really so glad that you have chosen 50% from the metric system and the 50% from the other system. And I think that's a very good start. And I have seen this in my own life when I did my engineering. My whole class was a mixture, a very big, actually a predominant mixture of people from the the metric system, and they are all very successful and very done very well in life. Wasif Sahab, we give scholarships to, as Asif mentioned, to the people who have gotten an admission in a government-run professional college, and they can't afford to pay their fees. We have done about 2,200 scholarships last year. And I would actually, I'm in Pakistan now, and I will be coming, I'm in Lahore, but I will be coming into Karachi on the 1st of March, and would really appreciate to sit down with you and learn, and where we can learn from each other what we are doing and what you're doing. So please, I would look for your time. Would you be there in March?
Look forward to hosting you. Absolutely, I'll be there on 1st of March. Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Looking forward
Thank you very
to welcoming you there. Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other comment, question? If there is no comment, so Wasif, I mean, we are all a part of your journey, want to be a part of it. How Habib University and yourself are teaching your students the habit of attention, the art of expression, the art of assuming a new intellectual position at a moment's notice in face of evidence, the art of entering quickly into the personal thoughts, even the willingness to accept that you might be wrong. Amazing journey. I can go on, but the most encouraging thing is that the light you had kindled has touched the hearts of other universities also, and they are following suit. And that is something that is where you have been a catalyst of change in the society. You alone may not have been able to write such a great revolution in the education, but you led the way, and that is catching on. So it seems that there is no other question or comment. I don't see a hand raised. Wasif, I'll give you the final word. You deserve it, and then we'll end this conversation.
No, thank you so much, Asif, especially to you and to Open. I was not familiar with this platform until 2-3 years ago, and I can see that this is its convening power, highly insightful citizens who are engaged with it, part of it. This conversation itself, I learned a number of things, the way to sort of view the way we are approaching problems in Pakistan. So it's an honor. I would just reiterate that one of the things that I think all of you have the agency and the network to spark a reflection on is the meaning of philanthropy. The meaning of philanthropy has shaped the most formidable in the world, which is the United States. I think apart from all the critique that one can generate, but one thing that stands out that how about 2.6% of its GDP is committed to various philanthropic causes, and within that about $60-70 billion they generate to invest in their universities. So I think that with all the problems and existentialist threats and so on that continue to exist in Pakistan, this is one important area where insights from all of you can greatly benefit the shape of many institutions in Pakistan.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Wasif. Thank you, all the participants. I hope that this discussion and this investment of time has made your Sunday a tad more enriching. Thank you very much, and God bless you all.